Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me, especially during this very busy time of the year. My name is Eva D'Agostini. I'm a member of the faculty of the Newfound Institute and a child psychologist. And I just have a few thoughts that I wanted to share with you, especially those of you who have children with special needs, things that might help you to get through this next few days in together with your children and in a way that perhaps would be just a little bit less emotional and full of all sorts of wonderful things, but also it can be very frustrating time of the year. So these are just some thoughts that I had, and I hope that they will help you. We're coming to a Christmas season that's very different than one that we've ever had before. And I know that actually for some of us, it will be very different and very frustrating, but for others, it might actually give us a sense of how we can better get through the season in general. So these are some of the thoughts that I had, especially for some of our children who are really experiencing challenges all the way through. Ideas just in general: compensate for immaturity, work with emotions, help children find their tears, prioritize attachment, and make time for play. We know that many of our children who have special needs also have problems with the development of their brain. We know that they have development in the area of the prefrontal cortex, the hippocampus, the cerebellum. I know that sounds very complicated, but I know that many of you have already had this presented to you when your child was given the diagnosis, that things were just developing differently. And as a result, your children have difficulty with executive functioning. And what we basically mean is they have memory problems, they have problem-solving problems, they have planning problems, they have impulsivity problems. Not that these things aren't going to get better over time, they absolutely will, but compared to other children of their age, they're struggling with this. And of course, this means that they are also struggling with their behavior. Now, in the holiday season, we sometimes think, well, things should get better, but actually there's more excitement. There's a change in routine and emotions are heightened. And these are factors that make it really even more difficult for even a well-functioning human brain to function. So what happens in the brain is our emotions get activated, and the part of our brain, the prefrontal cortex that manages our emotions, actually can get hijacked. And so rather than seeing better behavior, because we would think that our children would want to really behave well because of all that is happening, they very often actually have a harder time with their behavior. And so often we find just when we want the behaviors to be better, the behavioral challenges increase. So one of the things that we always need to think about, but especially at this time of year, is how can I anticipate and how can I prevent circumstances? Things that we need to ask ourselves is, when does my child have a difficult time? Where does my child have a difficult time? With whom does my child have a difficult time? And what can we do to make things easier for this child so that they can cope with what is expected? So many times we think that we provide extra, especially at schools, for example, they provide extra kind of activities. They have presentations that the children like to make, so that teachers are preparing the children for poems and songs. These are all very exciting things. It's a change from the regular routine, but for some children, that change in the routine is very, very difficult. Children, of course, very often will be very good at school, hold their behavior together, and then because they've just had, things have just been swirling around and been so much more difficult at school, when they get home, that's when they tend to have their meltdowns. So sometimes it's at the end of the school day. Sometimes it is when there's lots of noise. And again, with the holiday season, everybody's excited, voices go up. And so our children might have a hard time when things are very noisy. And of course, they might have a difficult time when there's with a substitute teacher, with people that they don't know, when even for some of them, it's with Santa. Santa makes it difficult for children. So we need to think about what is happening here in a time. when we want to throw routine out the window simply because we want to give our children joy and excitement and fun, we actually need to revert back to our routines as much as possible. And I think many of you have already figured that out. Bedtime needs to be kept pretty clearly. The good thing, of course, right now is that many of you are not doing the visiting that you used to do before. And so it is possible for you to maintain those routines. If somehow you've managed to figure out some kind of an exciting event with your children, do make sure that you plan some downtime. Every time they've had the excitement, they need more time to recoup and rest. Of course, if you can avoid situations that cause problems, that would be the ideal. Not because you want to deprive your child of a wonderful opportunity, but simply because sometimes it's really not worth it. It is just too much. And again, I think many of you in this time of pandemic are realizing that perhaps some of the plans and projects that you had with your children might have just been too much for them. And you can't do it right now. And maybe you are actually seeing that your child is doing better. If you've gotten yourself into a situation, or if you have to go into a situation that you know is going to be a bit overwhelming for your child, make sure that you have an exit plan. We always think that everyone is looking at us, everyone is judging us when we remove our child or take our child away when everybody else is having fun. But you all know that what we need to do is what's best for our child, not best for what other people think. Every one of us is doing what we know works, and we are the ones that need to be there to protect our children. So if you have to leave a particular event a little bit sooner because you know your child is starting to melt down, starting to have a hard time, go ahead and do that. That is your role as a parent, to be there for your child, to be their best bet, to be the one who cares for them. And I know that sometimes it can be challenging and difficult and disappointing for you and for the child. But all in all, if you can just get out of a situation before things fall apart, it's probably in everyone's best interest. One of the things that we know is that the holiday season increases emotion, joy, excitement, anticipation, even a little bit of trepidation, alarm, frustration, futility, even sadness and tears, even though this should be the happiest time of the year. Well, one of the things that we know is that the limbic system, the emotional part of the brain, does not distinguish emotions, just emotional activation. And emotions can actually flip flop really easily, and this causes a lot of confusion. One of the just recently, I had a chance to visit with a family of one of my family members, and one of the children has had experienced some trauma in her life. She was 12 years old at the time, and we had just gone out and got out into the woods and got to cut down a Christmas tree, and it was so beautiful. It was magical. It was winter time. There was snow. It was that wonderful crisp snow. We went deep into the woods. There was no light anywhere. We had to use our flashlights, and it was absolutely magical. We found the perfect little tree, brought it back home, set it up. The family had just moved, and so this was their first Christmas in their very lovely new home. We set up the tree and started to decorate it. Everything was going so well. Everyone was happy, and all of a sudden, she just flipped. She just started getting really upset with everybody and telling us to go away and telling us she didn't understand and whatever. And she just basically started to have a little bit of a meltdown. And her mom, who I don't know, didn't know all that well, and who was so afraid because I had been there helping them with this, was kind of looking a little bit worried. I just looked at her and I said, "No, you know what? She's just her brain is overexcited, and now it has gone from the joy into alarm and frustration, and that's fine. She'll come back to us. Let's just take care of her. Let's just tell her that it's okay." It wasn't that she was being ungrateful. It wasn't that she was being rude. It was just that her brain got overexcited. And when it got overexcited, it flipped from one emotional state to another emotional state. And she herself was even surprised. When it was all over, she said, "I don't understand why this happened." And we all just said to her, "It's okay. It's okay." So we need to be prepared for these sudden switches of emotion and recognize that it is just part of how we are as human beings, and that we have this ability to flip through emotions, and it's perfectly normal. When we look at frustration, and there's a lot of frustration, there's things that we can and can't do, especially now that it's in time of pandemic. But there's also the frustration of not getting the toys that we wanted, of not being able to wrap the presents that we want, of things just moving too quickly. So frustration is the emotion that we experience when we can't change something and when things aren't working the way we want them to work. One of the things that I have found over time, and this is true for me as a person, and I am in my 70s, and so you'd think by now I'd be able to get all my emotions sorted out and everything doing just fine. But when I feel frustration, one of the things that really helps me is to actually have a moment for venting and release. And as adults, we often do this. We can, take a little walk. We can go out to the parking lot. We can slam a door. We can do certain things that actually get out that frustration because frustration builds up inside of us. We need to find ways to get it out. And with our children, what we very often need to think about is where can I give them an opportunity for venting and releasing? If the child has been really good all day at school and tried so hard to be good, when they come home, are there some things that I can do as soon as we get in the door, as soon as we get to allow some of that frustration to come out in a way that doesn't hurt other people? Well, there's maybe lots of bubble wrap around now. You're wrapping presents to send to your family who are far away. Well, put some of the bubble wrap down on the floor and just give it a good old stomp. Or find some egg cartons. Instead of putting them into recycling, save them. The act of stomping on something actually lets out some of that frustration. And it can be done in a way that starts off, with a lot of, but also then can turn out into a lot of fun and join in. I'm sure you have some frustration inside of you that needs to come out. For some children, jumping on the trampoline is a lifesaver. Um, Another thing that I'm recommending now is pool noodle sword fighting. This might be something that the dads might enjoy, or those of you that like this kind of the physical activity. And again, pool noodles tend not to be able to hurt each other, and they can get out some of that sense of just the adrenaline and the cortisol that are inside of us when we're full of frustration. Or if you don't like the fighting part of it, use the pool noodles to do some drumming. It's very, very satisfying. And most kids, after a good chance of letting it out and then just laughing about it and making different kinds of noises, oh, they just feel so much better. Some of your children, it might be just pushing and pulling, just holding their hand, just pushing hands together, pushing, pulling, just allowing some of that frustration, adrenaline, cortisol to come out in a way that is not hurtful to someone else, that recognizes that it's there, that recognizes that it needs to get out, and maybe can actually be fun. Also, another way of getting out frustration is lots of time for play. Some of our children actually do end up doing some play fighting. They play different kinds of, attacking games with their toys. That's perfectly fine. It's just a way for them to get that frustration out in a way that doesn't necessarily hurt someone else. The more the child has held their frustration in all day, the more they need to get it out through play. Now, one of the things we need to be aware of that we actually use emotions to try and manage our children's behavior. And I know we need them to be good because you've got a Christmas tree to put up, you've got presents to wrap, you've got so many things, things to bake, so many things to plan. Maybe a fewer this year simply because we know there aren't going to be all the events. But we do need to be careful because we do are using certain emotions to get our children to behave. And of course, who do we want them to behave? Well, Santa, and we often use Santa. And this is a picture of a person who is very dear to my heart. Um, Here's what we say to our children. He's making a list. He's checking it twice. He's going to find out who's naughty or nice. He knows if you've been bad or good, so be good for goodness sake. Well, this actually raises children's alarm. And when we are in alarm, we actually are more cautious. We are more careful. I know that sometimes we just say, "Oh, Santa's looking," and your child will become quiet or will withdraw, will not say what they wanted to say or not do what they wanted to do. But that actually is an emotion that's called alarm. Or our children will say, I want to be good for Santa. I want to be good. I know that I've seen some YouTube interactions between children and Santa because Santas are using Zoom these days. And this little girl, "Oh, Santa, I've been good. I've been trying so hard to be good." And actually, it broke my heart because, of course, every child tries to be good. and they try so hard, but when they try really hard, sometimes it can actually backfire. We also sometimes use the elf. I know that it's sometimes recommended that we say, the elf is watching us. He'll tell Santa how you are behaving. But actually, the alarm and the pursuit, while that can cause good behavior, just remember that with alarm and pursuit comes frustration, and it can rear its ugly head. So we have to be very, very careful, because if we, and again, we're not doing this because we're mean people. And we doing it because we want our children. We need to get through this time. But alarm and pursuit can help children to be good for a little while, but it doesn't actually change their behavior, and it can increase their frustration. So many of you have found, if not this year, at least in the past, that there was often more meltdowns, but they didn't happen at the time when the child was trying to be good for Santa. They happened at another time over something that was kind of innocuous, and maybe we were wondering about it. But if we remember that alarm, pursuit, so the desire to be good for somebody, and frustration are kind of a three things that come together, we might not want to use these as much as we do. When I talked to my very dear, close, personal friend and spouse, Santa, this is what he said to me. He said, gifts are given from the heart. If we want to teach our children generosity and kindness, we should not make them have to earn their gifts. So sometimes, and I said to him, well, Santa, when somebody tells you that a child has misbehaved, and he says very often it's the sibling, Santa, he hasn't been good. I've been really good, Santa, but my brother, he hasn't been good. And the poor little brother looks up at Santa and goes, kind of with tears in his eyes, because he's sure this time Santa's just going to shake his head and tell him it's too late. This is what Santa says. He says to both of the children, all children really want to be kind and good. And you know what? You can always try again tomorrow, but it's okay to make mistakes. I don't expect you to be good all the time. It's okay. Um, because what we need to remember is that rewards, being good so that we can earn our presents, doesn't actually change the brain. It doesn't cause an immature brain to mature. As you know, children can act good to earn something, but that doesn't actually grow them up. And good behavior comes from the more as we become more mature, we're able to manage our behavior, and most children will spontaneously be good if they can. But sometimes their emotions and their immaturity make it really difficult for them. So while this is very useful for us, we also need to give children a lot of grace and understanding, and let them know that who they are, what they are, is enough for them to warrant the gifts that we want to give them. If you have an elf on the shelf, and maybe you've been using elf as a little bit of a spy there, you can switch it around now. You can say to your children, you know what? The elf told me the other day that you've been good enough, and he's proud of you and Santa's proud of you. And then you can have fun with the elf. You can, where is he? How did she get there? Where is he going next? What did she see on the way? Oh, is she going to give a message to Santa? Let's give another little message to Santa. And so rather than the elf becoming someone who's observing them, the elf now just becomes the fun of the Christmas season. And when adults and children have fun together, things get much better. And of course, remember, keep the elf simple. Some families only do elf on the weekends. You don't have to do elf all the time. It doesn't have to be crazy. It has children. It's the magic of the elf that matters, not all the fanciful things that you need to do. Don't put more pressure on yourself than you need to. Just make it fun. When your eyes light up, your children's eyes will light up. The other thing we need to remember as well is that having tears and sadness is not a bad thing. I know that many parents have been concerned over the pandemic. My child is crying, but actually, what we need to know is that when children cry, this is an opportunity for their brains to actually rewire, for their brains to adapt. Because when we cry, the adrenaline and the cortisol that is inside of us, trying to make our world work, actually is drained. And when those chemicals are drained, our brain has this incredible capacity for growing and developing. And over the Christmas holidays, again, there's all sorts of reasons for children to feel sadness, but it's often not that, which is what they're crying about. Many of them need to grieve what's not working in their world. So what I recommend over this time, and again, I think we'll have a bit more time to do this, is actually find the movies that help your children to find their tears. Read the sad stories, and then make the time to sit with the tears, no matter how silly or insignificant the reason. I learned a long, long time ago that when a child comes to us with a little bobo, with a little thing that's wrong with them, my finger hurts, and you look and say, "Man, I don't understand what's hurting here," or that wasn't what I wanted to get for Christmas, and we would sometimes, well, look at there's a whole pile of presents there. Why are you crying about this one present? Well, it's really not. That's what they're crying about. They have of our children have a sea of tears inside of them that do need to come out. And this might be a little moment in time when the children can get to cry. They can't tell us about the big reasons. I wish this wasn't wrong with me. I wish I was like every other child. They need to cry and grieve about that, but they're going to cry about the present. Or they're going to cry about the little thing that hurts, or they're going to cry about the fact that they don't like their brother or sister. But when the tears start, it's one of the biggest gifts that we can get from our children, because now they've left down their defenses. Now they're willing to be vulnerable with us. Now they're able to let out all that sadness, and we can just sit there with them. It's really hard for us as parents, as caregivers, to be with our child when they're having their sadness and tears. We have these instincts in us called alpha instincts, and we want to fix it. And that's why we went the extra mile to find them a present that they really love. And now here they are crying because it wasn't the present that they wanted. And again, there's sometimes no rhyme or reason, because the tears are not there because of the act, but because of what's behind it. And so when we are there with our children, rather than trying to fix it, rather than trying to solve it, rather than trying to give them the answer and have them look on the bright side, just be with them. Sit with them. And here are a couple of things you might want to say to yourself quietly inside your head as you hold your child in your arms. I am helping my child to grieve for all the things that she or he cannot change, and then she'll become resilient. Tears lead to adaptation. Tears lead to the capacity to work in a world that doesn't work for us. But first, we have to pass through the tears. Or you can say to yourself, I'm helping my child to grieve for how scary the world is, so that he or she can find the courage to keep on. And many of your children need incredible courage. So use this time of emotions. And if the emotion that comes out is sadness or tears, to just sit with your child, to hold them, and to know that that is enough. We need to make sure that during this time we prioritize attachment, that we treat the need for attachment like the need for food, that we provide more than what is asked for. We provide a feast of attachment, and that we provide it generously. Sometimes we think, well, I gave my child a hug, and I've got all these things that I have to do. Why does he keep bugging me? Well, if a child keeps bugging you and is kind of swirling around your ankles, take a moment, give them a huge hug. You'd be surprised how they might be quite comfortable going. But sometimes they just need that reassurance, because it is an emotional time of year. When the attachment needs are fulfilled, children are growing. So try and make attachment unconditional. Don't make them work for the attachment. When children are working, they are not growing. Reassure them that your love and your caring will always be there. And so don't make it relationships dependent on rewards, and provide more attachment when the behavior is at its worst. And I know that seems counterintuitive. My goodness, we think if I'm more loving and more caring, isn't that going to just reinforce their bad behaviors? But I don't know about you. When I've had a bad day, and I know my spouse has seen me go off in the morning quite grumpy, and he knows I probably didn't help things along. When I come back at the end of the day and I tell him about how grumpy everybody else was, I don't want him to remind me that it might have been partly my fault. I want him to take care of me. Give me that extra glass of wine. Give me that, warm up that pizza in the oven. And surprisingly, as we all know, when someone cares for us, even it often occurs to us that maybe, whew, I should have done something differently. But the act of caring allowed me to think about. So very often we need to remember that our children need the biggest hugs when they're having the hardest time. And that is really hard to do, but hopefully you'll find it in your heart to do that. Um, Sometimes we have to separate our children. We know that we want to keep, but sometimes the other children need to be kept safe. Sometimes we need to find our tempering element. I remember sending my daughter to her room and thinking it's not about her needing to go to her room. It's about me needing some space to calm myself down, to remember that it isn't, she's just a child, to remember that things are frustrating for her. My child had a learning disability. So at the end of the day, she had held it all in and she often had a meltdown at the end of the day, and I even despite my best efforts, sometimes she just triggered me and I was getting over emotional. So I needed her to go to her room so that I could remember how to help her through a difficult time. So that's okay. And sometimes you just need your children to be away from you because you're human. But what we need to remember is that if we bridge what could divide, if we are the ones that need to reassure our children that it's okay, we can start again, and we need to repair with them. We need to let them know things like, um, we'll find a way to make things better. I didn't mean to yell at you. I'll find another way to let you know what I expect. It doesn't mean that we don't have expectations of our children, but we all know there were times when we behaved in a way we were not proud of. And with my daughter, it's very interesting because she's an adult now, and I've asked her often. I said, I wasn't a very patient parent. I said I did a lot of yelling, and she says, "Yeah, mom, but you always came and talked to me, and then I knew that you still loved me." Oh, thank goodness. Thank goodness. But as long as we bridge what could divide, as long as we let our children know that it's okay, they have permission to be with us and that we will still love them, it's amazing how many things they can tolerate and handle. One of the last things I want to let you know is about play. Play is so important, and there will be more time this Christmas for our children to be playing. Of course, if you can keep them off the digital devices, that would be just great. Although some of the online games are not as bad, but try and make sure that there is a period of time, a chunk of time, when children are left to their own devices. Because when they play alone, they are creating an identity, and they are working through their emotions. You're going to see them playing hospitals and maybe even people dying and people getting sick and people helping them, and also they're going to be playing out all sorts of things, and don't be distressed if they're doing that, because this is a safe place for them to let out what it is that's going on inside of them, and they need that time alone. I remember when my children were little, in the afternoon everybody had 1 hour in which it was quiet time alone, where they could do or think or play with however they wanted to play. Now, of course, they're going to be playing with each other as well, and this is one of the ways in which they practice getting along with others. But also, when children get together and play, they are also again playing through their emotions. They might do some play fighting, and that's okay. This is a way to let out some of that frustration, some of that alarm, some of the things that they're dealing with. And of course, it's important for children to play with us. And one of the wonderful things is that when we play with our children, it deepens their attachment to us, and sometimes we can help them work through their emotions. We can play alarming, scary games, playing monster and chasing them, and we do the pool noodle sword fighting, and we could, build things, build something out in the snow, and then crash it down. These are all ways in which we can help our children deal with alarm and frustration, and get through, and then basically do that in the context of attachment. Finally, what about yourselves? Again, I know that many of you are very good at this, but don't forget to identify your own support system, your own village, your family, your partner, your friends. Make some special time for that. Feel that you're surrounded by people that are caring for you. And I know it's really hard in this time of pandemic when we have to do it through Zoom or on the phone. Also, give yourself permission to vent. Find that special person or those special people, but at least just find one person and say to them, I just need some time to let it out. Talk about your alarm. Talk about your frustration. Talk about your sadness. Talk about how hard it is to be the perfect parent. And it's okay. Your friend will understand. There's nothing sometimes we say, well, I shouldn't be complaining. This isn't about complaining. This is about letting emotions move through us. Because if we try and hold it all in, that's the recipe for depression. Find a place and give a place to give yourself permission to vent. And many of you know that after you vented, you say, I didn't really mean that. I still love my children. I'm not going to give up on them. I'm not giving up on myself. Thank you for listening. And this is exactly what we need. then find your own sadness. Watch those sad movies with your kids. Let some of the tears flow. Recognize that, especially when in this time of year, in this time of pandemic, and if we are dealing with situations that are challenging for us, we need to grieve what we cannot change so that we can move forward. And of course, see if you can find, maybe in that time of quiet time, nurture your passions, have some playtime that is just for you, so that you can get through this season that is going to be different, but also challenging in its own way. Just some last little insights that I would like to share with you. It's only in the context of safe attachment that children can grow and develop. In order to give that to them, provide generously, forgive easily, forgive them, forgive yourself, feel your sadness about not necessarily being able to be the perfect parent so that you can get up again, and have faith in nature's plan. Children will grow and develop. It just might take longer than we think. So enjoy the Christmas holidays and enjoy the season together. Try and find some ways to support your children and yourselves. And I know that things will go much better than you expect. So I wish you all a very Merry Christmas, all the best for the coming year, hoping that 2021 will bring you many blessings and joy. All the best.